So, visions are one of the most widely recognized concepts in the Genshin universe. Everyone knows about them, and I suspect even if people haven't played the game, they might have at least seen visions as a part of merch or in trailers. In the game, they are described as external magical foci, which allow their bearers to access elemental energy to produce various effects. Since the inception of visions in Genshin, fans have been trying to figure out both what the criteria for gaining a vision is and what, if any, differences there are between the people of different elemental visions. Some of these questions have been answered as the game has moved forward. For example, after the Fontaine Archon quest, we now know for sure that visions are granted, at least in part, by those who have elemental authority over the element. We know this because Neuvillette talks about setting aside some of his elemental power to grant visions, and he's the one who grants Farina her vision. This tells us that whether or not an Archon has a Gnosis doesn't really impact whether or not visions are granted. By this same token, we can infer that visions are not exactly granted by Celestia either, or at least not fully granted by Celestia. After all, there's no reason for Neuvillette to align himself with Celestia, even for the sake of granting visions. That being said, Archons all claim that they do not have direct control over the granting of visions. But, according to the Genshin Wiki, vision bearers, also known as Allegens, who achieve their goals and ambitions with a vision, grant the gods an abundant gift. What this gift is, we don't know, and the Archons never reference this, so we don't know if they're aware of it either. Additionally, through the Inazuma Archon quest, we learn that those deprived of their visions will, in most cases, have major psychological damage. We also know that visions were not a part of the original Order of Teyvat, and instead were put in place by the Heavenly Principles to suppress the original order of the world. To this end, the Heavenly Principles also created the Gnosis and started the Archon War. This makes the role visions play into the plan of the Primordial Ones, Celestia, and the Heavenly Principles, at least partially suspect. The Seven were given the stolen elemental authorities, which originally belonged to the Dragon Sovereigns, along with the duty of granting a vision, using a fragment of their elemental power, to anyone whose powerful desire or ambition stepped into the threshold of the sacred, whatever that means. Essentially, any and all visions that are granted are done only when someone has a significant ambition or desire. This being said, vision bearers are rare, and each element seems to have its own criteria for selecting participants. What those criteria are, though, is unknown. General statements can be made for each elemental type. For example, electrovisions tend to be given to eccentrics, or those who fall outside of society's rules, which can be seen with characters like Beidou and Razor. Geovisions generally seem to be granted to those who have an unwavering will or resolve, such as Noelle and Chiori. However, there are exceptions to even these rules. Characters like Yunjin and Sino are good examples of this. While one can argue that Sino, for example, is an outsider by the nature of being from the desert, and that the general Mahamatra inherently has to be held separate from others, I would argue that Sino's sense of justice and unwavering resolve in his job would align him more with a Hydrovision or a Geovision. Yunjin is a talented artist, and she gained her vision once she finally performed an opera where she felt she could become the character she was playing. I would argue that this would align her more with an Animo-vision or perhaps a Cryo-vision, as this doesn't really scream unwavering resolve to me. This is not even mentioning how certain characters seem to gain their visions. Some gain them in dramatic moments, epiphanies of their philosophical ideas, or in life or death combat. Other times, the vision seems to appear inconsequentially, while the character was asleep, or it simply appeared one day with no great catalyst. Some visions seem to appear out of nowhere, while others are masterless visions that become reactivated after some time. All of this is to say that visions, despite being a ubiquitous function of Genshin from the very beginning, still have a lot of mystery to them, and may not be what they appear on the surface. The way visions work, their purpose in the grand scheme of things, and how they are granted are all questions that the fandom still has. While there are many jokes about different visions, such as Cryo vision bearers tending to hold secrets, Animo vision bearers having dead friends or loved ones, Geo vision bearers either being abnormally stubborn or sharing the IQ of a rock, looking at Arataki Ito for that one. The truth of the matter is, we don't know how visions are granted. There are certainly patterns, but even within those patterns, one can argue that these visions could just as easily be another element. In my opinion, I believe we're going to see visions and their lore having a lot to do with endgame content, and the overall plan that Celestia has for Teyvat as a whole. But until then, the fandom will have to continue to speculate and theorize about how people can get certain visions. If you like this video, let me know by liking and leaving a comment, and subscribe if you want to. May the wind bless your travels.